Welcome, y'all. It's Wes with DIY Food Plot Pro. Thank you so much for joining us. Today's episode, we're talking about TSI, or Timber Stand Improvement, or FSI, Forestry Stand Improvement, which is right for the deer hunting properties that we're trying to maximize the amount of deer and maximize that farm's ability to harvest mature deer, right? That's a huge thing as well. We're not just trying to hold as many whitetails as what we can. We're trying to hold as many whitetails as what we can, but we're also trying to make it very hunter friendly to where we can access this property and that we can hunt this property. We can kill the mature bucks on the property without boogering a whole lot of things up and kill those mature bucks regularly every single year. When I'm doing a lot of the consulting in the wintertime, this comes up almost every farm that we have. TSI or FSI. It's something that is limited across the Midwest, especially when you get into the ag country. You have very limited TSI or FSI that's been done on any properties that speak of. Most of them look just like what we have here behind us. You can tell we have big open timber, mainly oak, white oak and red oak. Very little food on the ground. You can see nothing on the ground between 0 and 3 feet. Very little woody browse and very little in the way of food for a whitetail here. And then we all get mad because they're eating our food plots and they're eating the farmer's crops or whatever. And it's like we got a 100-acre farm and we got 70 of it's woods, 30 of it's ag or food plots or whatever, and they're eating all those up. And then our woods look like this. Why are they going to those food plots so hard? Why are they going to that ag so hard? Because there's absolutely nothing here for them to eat. Literally. I mean, there's nothing there for a whitetail to eat. So he's forced to go to those agricultural areas. He's forced to go to those food plots. And that can be a blessing or a curse, either which way you want to look at it. It can make planting food plots extremely difficult when you have high browse pressure on those food plots. It can make planting things other than alfalfa and clover very, very difficult. Some winter rye, winter wheat in the fall and winter time. But other than that, things like corn, soybeans, those are kind of off the table in those areas because browse pressure is too high. So today let's talk about FSI and TSI. TSI, the very definition is timber stand improvement. So basically what we're looking for at TSI is typically what's done on most farms. Now, it doesn't really get implemented as much as what it could, but typically what's happened with the TSI, we're managing for our timber, right? So our timber gets mature. We go in and we have a logger, we have an appraiser come in and they look at it and they cruise the timber and they tell us how many board feet are there. And then they go in and they set a minimum. And so maybe a lot of times that is a 16-inch around here. That's around a 16-inch minimum, maybe 18 depending on the landowner. So they go in and they cut that down to 16 inches. Anything at 16 inches or less gets left. Anything higher than that gets taken. Timber stand improvement can be going in here also and thinning some of these trees down that are taking up valuable sunlight from our desirable species. So say we have a lot of maples that are not worth as much around in my area. We also have a lot of white oaks. Well, it would be wise for us to cut some of these maples down that are competing with those white oaks and let that white oak get significantly bigger faster, right? So that's timber stand improvement. We all pretty much understand what that is. Now, the other one's the one you don't hear about as much, and that's forestry stand improvement. Most folks, when they talk about cutting anything for whitetails, they're talking about TSI. In general, they're really talking about FSI. FSI is forestry stand improvement. So timber is done for the timber, right? That's done for the benefit of the timber, where forestry stand improvement is for the benefit of the forest. What's the most beneficial for the forest? Is it an entire area full of big mature hardwoods? Is it an entire area of a clear cut? Or is it a mix? In my opinion, I like that mix. I like those big mature trees because that's also going to give you tree stand locations. That's also going to give you your acorns and your nuts that deer eat, that hard mast in the fall. And I also like those bedding thickets that is made from those clear cuts. Both these kind of come together. I think on an ideal farm, if we were looking at what's most beneficial for everything from timber to wildlife, I think we would look at a blend of that, from some mature hardwoods to some clear cuts, some thinning cuts. We would have a variety of habitat on this property. For FSI, Typically what I like to do, I'm going in and I'm making bedding cuts because most of our woods look like this. So very limited amounts of thickets on the properties. So when I go in, I'm going in to make clear cuts. I'm making clear areas for whitetails to bed and to increase woody browse for them to eat. So we got ourselves a 3/4 of an acre here that we're going to cut. We're going to make this a bedding area. We go in and we clear a lot of the mid-story. We clear anything that's pretty good size. The rule that I look at is if you have a lot of big timber, it doesn't take an awful lot of cutting to get a lot of sunlight hitting that ground. But if you have smaller trees that are like this, you can be in for an awful lot of work trying to get any sunlight on the ground if it's more like pole timber, where you can take out 2 or 3 of the big trees and all of a sudden let a tremendous amount of sunlight hit that ground. And that's just all of a sudden over the next 2 or 3 years, you're going to see a tremendous amount of growth in there. And that's something that whitetails need. That's something that whitetails use throughout the entire year, but especially during the fall and winter hunting seasons. That's when those areas are the most critical, when woody browse is the main food source for whitetails. So that kind of brings me to another point, is when you're talking about setting these properties up and you're talking about doing FSI, we got a thinning cut here and we got a thinning cut here. What are we doing when we're adding these bedding areas to the properties? Well, we're not only adding cover, which is definitely needed in these woods, we're also adding food. Most of the time when we make that cut, it's going to take a year, and it's just mainly going to be annuals that first year. By the second and third year of growth, a lot of that clear cut, it's going to turn into a bunch of saplings. Well, what do saplings give whitetails? Tremendous amount of food source, as you have woody browse all over that entire area for those whitetails to eat. It's very beneficial not only from a cover standpoint, but you're also adding more food to the property. And not only are you adding the wintertime food, you're also adding the summertime food. You go out into a clear cut and you can see the difference. I did a clear cut last year on a bedding area that I was making, and it's amazing. If you go back this year, you can visually see the difference between bare ground to where it's mature timber, and literally the foot that I started making that clear cut, the vegetation jumps up and it's this tall. And I'll show you a video of that. I've got some pictures and videos of that. It's just unbelievable the amount of growth when you let that sunlight hit that ground that will explode from that ground. There's nothing else needed. Some people try to make this too complicated. Is you go in there and you cut those trees and you let that sunlight hit the ground and it will explode with growth. And whitetails will 100% key in on that area, and it won't take them long. Good example, I had a power line come through a farm. It's almost no cover on this property. It looks very similar to this. Agricultural property, 50% ag, 50% woods. They cut through this little slough that went down through there. Mainly holds water in wet times. Just a great big ditch, but it's really fertile soil. It's down in the river bottoms. It's been 2 years since that's been cut now. I mapped this out the other day. It's 0.9 acres. That's all it is, less than an acre. It is unbelievable how many big mature bucks are using that bedding area. Unbelievable. And areas that were really null and void on that property a couple, 3 years ago, all of a sudden are really good hunting areas now because we've moved that bedding. And we didn't really purposely do that. That's just something that we've seen happen. I know many of you have seen the same thing, and when your farm gets logged and you see how good the hunting is for a few years after. It's unbelievable, right? You got all that cover, you got all that woody browse, then all of a sudden that stuff starts growing back up and we're right back to where square one. And it's mainly because when we're going in there and we're cutting those, we're not cutting them hard enough. That's typically what you find in the Midwest and in farm country, is you're managing for timber. So you're never getting those good solid thickets that you typically would because you're not cutting hard enough. You cut it down to a 16 or an 18, well, all of a sudden you still got a good canopy up there. Matter of 2 or 3 years, that 16 or 18 inch tree, all of a sudden that canopy just explodes, blocks all the light from getting down to the forest floor to get that growth that you're looking for. TSI and FSI both are used on properties. When I show up to do consultations, many folks after watching the channel, they're thinking FSI everything, right? FSI, but it's not really that case. It's a combination of FSI and TSI, and that kind of throws people for a curveball. Well, why are we doing timber stuff? We're looking for deer. This is a deer hunting property. Why are we messing with timber stand improvement instead of do all forest stand improvement? Because by doing that, we can dictate where these whitetails bed, where they're at, and where they're, more specifically, where they're not at, right? So we have an area here. Let's say our road access is here. Would we be good to go through here all the way back to this road and do a big FSI through here? No, because that's where the deer are going to be, right? That's going to be areas that the deer are already going to be in. We can't walk through these areas without bumping these deer. So what would be better is to have our FSI up here, and from here back, we're going to do our TSI. We're going to let that big timber stand. And we know that those mature bucks are going to choose these thick cut areas where cover is thicker to bed in rather than in that wide open timber. They don't feel safe in that wide open timber. So we use a combination of TSI and FSI. TSI is areas where we're going to be accessing. If we wanted to hunt here, we definitely would not want to go on here and do a full FSI right here. It just makes sense, right? We're pushing deer here to our access. Or if we have a TSI up here and it's just great big open timber, we can think with reasonable expectations, there's not going to be a tremendous amount of mature bucks using this area to bed in. They're going to be using the FSI areas that if we have enough of them spread across the farm, those big mature bucks are going to target on that thicker cover where they have a higher amount of woody browse. That's where they're going to be. It's a combination of FSI and TSI. We're using that FSI to make those bedding cuts, to make that thick regeneration cover and food for those whitetails. TSI, we're using that for our access to get into those FSI areas. If you need help setting up your deer hunting farms, I've got a website set up, www.diyfoodplotpro.com. You can go there and you can click on the boots on the ground visit. I'll come to your farm, I'll walk it, we'll set up food plots, set up cover, we'll set up screening, access, stand and blind locations. We'll cover all of that in the binder and the folder. If that's something that interests you, you can go to www.diyfoodplotpro.com, click on contact us or boots on the ground visit. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Y'all smash that like and subscribe button.